The flash of cameras cut through the Manhattan air like lightning, surrounding Olivia Bennett with relentless intensity. The CEO of Bennett Foundation found herself cornered by a swarm of paparazzi outside Westfield Mall, their questions about embezzlement allegations striking like bullets. She stumbled backward as the crowd pressed closer, her designer heel catching on the pavement. That's when Jackson Reed, former Special Forces soldier, instinctively stepped between her and the chaos, creating a human shield with his broad shoulders and steady presence. His daughter Lily clutched his hand, wide-eyed with fear. Jackson Reed never planned on being anyone's hero again. The 35-year-old former soldier had left that life behind 3 years ago when his wife Sarah lost her battle with cancer, leaving him the sole caretaker of their daughter Lily. The scar that ran along his jawline had faded over time, but the invisible wounds of war and loss remained etched deeper than any physical injury. Each morning, he would wake before dawn, prepare Lily's lunch, and tuck a note inside with a simple message of love. By 6:30, he would arrive at Ironclad Fitness in Brooklyn, where he worked as a personal trainer, a job that barely covered their rent for the modest 2-bedroom apartment they called home. On weekends, he picked up security gigs to supplement their income, always calculating the cost of Lily's future education in his head. He had promised Sarah that their daughter would have every opportunity, and Jackson Reed never broke his promises. The military had shaped Jackson in ways civilian life never could. 8 years in Special Forces had taught him to assess threats instantaneously, to make split-second decisions, and to protect the vulnerable at all costs. These skills had served him well in combat zones across Afghanistan, but they felt oddly out of place in Brooklyn, where his biggest daily challenge was convincing reluctant clients to complete one more set of burpees. Still, he maintained the disciplined routine of a soldier. 5-mile runs at dawn, protein-rich meals prepared efficiently, and a home where everything had its proper place. Only in his dreams did the structured facade crumble, memories of exploding IEDs and Sarah's hospital room colliding in a nightmarish landscape he navigated alone. Olivia Bennett carried her own invisible scars beneath her polished exterior. At 38, she had built the Bennett Foundation from the ground up after her brother Michael, a decorated Army Ranger, took his own life following a losing battle with PTSD. Born into military aristocracy as a general's daughter, Olivia rejected the privileged path laid before her to create something meaningful from her family's tragedy. Her Manhattan penthouse remained sparsely furnished despite her success. She spent most nights sleeping on the leather couch in her office, surrounded by grant proposals and financial reports. The recent embezzlement allegations threatened everything she had built, and trust did not come easily to a woman who had seen how quickly people could vanish from your life. Her last serious relationship had ended 2 years ago, when her then-boyfriend and the foundation's financial director, William, had chosen ambition over integrity. Since then, work had become her sanctuary and her prison. The foundation had started small, just Olivia and an administrative assistant working out of a cramped office in Midtown, but had grown to serve thousands of veterans across the country. They provided housing assistance, mental health services, job training, and community reintegration programs. Each success story felt like a small victory against the darkness that had claimed her brother. Each veteran who found their way back to civilian life a tribute to Michael's memory. The thought that someone had stolen money meant for these vulnerable men and women made Olivia physically ill. She had trusted William completely, both professionally and personally, never imagining he could betray both her heart and her cause simultaneously. The morning after the mall incident, Olivia found herself standing outside Ironclad Fitness, coffee in hand, convincing herself this wasn't a mistake. She needed to thank the stranger who had helped her escape the press ambush, nothing more. When she stepped inside, the familiar scent of determination and sweat greeted her. Her eyes scanned the modest facility until they landed on a little girl with copper-colored pigtails, sitting in a small alcove near the front desk, focused intently on a math workbook. Recognition flickered across Olivia's face, just as Jackson emerged from the staff room, freezing mid-step when he saw her. "Ms. Bennett," he said with a professional nod, the surprise in his eyes quickly masked behind practiced composure. "What brings you to our humble establishment?" Olivia extended her hand, noticing the calluses on his palm as they shook. I wanted to thank you properly for yesterday. Not many people would have stepped in like that. Jackson shrugged, a gesture that minimized his actions while drawing her attention to the breadth of his shoulders. Anyone would have done the same. We both know that's not true, Olivia replied, her voice softening as she glanced toward Lily. Your daughter was very brave too. A flicker of pride crossed Jackson's face. She gets that from her mother. The words carried a weight that Olivia immediately recognized, the language of loss. Their conversation might have ended there if Lily hadn't looked up, her face brightening with recognition. You're the lady from the mall, the one the scary people were chasing. Jackson's gentle reprimand about appropriate conversation starters was interrupted by Olivia's genuine laugh, a sound that surprised them both. What began as a simple thank you evolved into an impromptu personal training session, Olivia claiming she needed to improve her running from paparazzi skills. As Jackson guided her through exercises, they exchanged small fragments of their lives, like strangers trading coins of unfamiliar currency, cautiously testing their value. Before leaving, Olivia placed an application for a scholarship program on the counter. The Westside Academy has an excellent program for gifted children. The foundation sponsors several students each year. She glanced at Lily, who was now absorbed in a book about stars and galaxies. Your daughter seems exceptional. Jackson's expression hardened immediately, pride and dignity forming a shield more impenetrable than any he'd created against the paparazzi. We're doing just fine, Ms. Bennett. I don't need charity. This isn't charity, Mr. Reed, Olivia countered, her professional mask slipping to reveal a flash of her own stubborn pride. This is gratitude. There's a difference. She left the application on the counter and walked out, leaving Jackson staring after her, the paper between them like a bridge neither was quite ready to cross. Over the following weeks, Olivia began visiting Ironclad Fitness regularly, claiming the convenient location and Jackson's no-nonsense approach to training aligned with her schedule and personality. In truth, she found herself looking forward to the hour each day when she could set aside the mounting pressures of the foundation investigation and simply focus on the physical challenge before her. Jackson remained professionally distant at first, but the walls between them gradually lowered as their sessions continued. Lily became the unexpected catalyst in their evolving relationship. The young girl would often be working on homework when Olivia arrived, and soon they developed a routine where Olivia would help her with math problems while Jackson prepared for their session. Lily possessed a curious mind and an old soul, asking questions that sometimes caught Olivia off guard with their perception. Did you always want to help soldiers like my dad? Lily asked one afternoon. My teacher says we should find something we love and make it our mission. Olivia had paused, considering how to answer truthfully without mentioning her brother's suicide to a 7-year-old. Sometimes our missions find us, she finally replied, when we least expect them. Jackson overheard this exchange, and something shifted in his demeanor afterward. He began sharing more about his military service, the camaraderie, the purpose, the challenges of civilian reintegration, topics he usually avoided. One evening, as they were finishing a particularly grueling session, he asked Olivia about the Foundation's work with veteran families, not just the veterans themselves. That's actually a gap in our programming, she admitted, toweling sweat from her neck. We focus primarily on the veterans' immediate needs, housing, health care, employment, but the support system around them is just as critical to their recovery. Jackson nodded, his expression thoughtful. The families serve too, in their way. The next morning, Olivia called Jackson with an unexpected proposition. One of her foundation's donors had reported being followed, and security concerns were mounting around the investigation. She needed someone she could trust to accompany her to several high-profile meetings as additional security. I'd pay your regular consulting rate, of course, she added quickly. Jackson hesitated only briefly before accepting, arranging for a colleague to cover his training sessions and for Lily to stay with a neighbor on the days he'd be working late. Within days, he had seamlessly integrated into Olivia's professional world, standing vigilant at charity galas, board meetings, and donor dinners. In the quiet moments between events, sitting in town cars or waiting in office lobbies, they continued building bridges between their worlds, one conversation at a time. As spring bloomed across the city, Their professional relationship developed alongside a tentative friendship. Jackson found himself sharing stories about Sarah that he hadn't spoken aloud in years. How she would dance in the kitchen while making pancakes. Her passion for astronomy that had inspired Lily's love of stars. The way she had faced her diagnosis with unflinching courage. Olivia, in turn, slowly revealed pieces of herself beyond the polished CEO facade. Her childhood on military bases around the world, her complicated relationship with her father, and eventually, the truth about Michael's suicide and how it had driven her to create the foundation. Lily began spending afternoons at the foundation offices when Jackson's security duties coincided with school dismissal. The staff quickly adopted her, providing a small desk in Olivia's office where she could do homework and read. One afternoon, Olivia returned from a meeting to find Lily crying quietly in the corner. Kneeling beside her, Olivia gently asked what was wrong. "Maddie said I'm weird because I don't have a mom," Lily whispered, wiping her eyes with small fists. "She said normal families have moms and dads." Olivia felt a sharp ache in her chest, memories of her own childhood losses surfacing unexpectedly. "You know what?" she said, opening her desk drawer and removing a leather-bound journal. "When I was sad about my brother, I started writing down memories of him so I would never forget the good things." She placed the journal in Lily's hands. "Sometimes the people we love can't stay with us, but we can keep them close in other ways." The following day, Olivia presented Lily with a new navy blue scarf, nearly identical to the cherished one from her grandmother. "Everyone needs something that makes them feel brave," she explained, helping Lily wrap it around her shoulders. "This can be your superhero cape when you need courage." Jackson witnessed this exchange from the doorway, his expression unreadable. Later that night, after Lily had fallen asleep, he texted Olivia a simple message: "Thank you for seeing her." 3 words that contained volumes. The foundation's audit was nearing completion when Olivia received the devastating news. William Harrington, her ex-boyfriend and the foundation's former financial director, had indeed been siphoning funds from veteran assistance programs into offshore accounts. As she prepared for an emergency board meeting to address the findings, Olivia overheard Jackson on the phone in the adjacent conference room, his voice low but intense. "I need you to run with this story, Mike. Full exposure on Harrington's dealings, including the offshore accounts in the Caymans. The documents I've sent should provide enough evidence for your editor to greenlight it." There was a pause. "No, she doesn't know I'm talking to you. Let's keep it that way for now." The blood drained from Olivia's face as the implications settled over her like a cold shadow. Jackson, the man she had welcomed into her professional and personal life, the man who had access to confidential foundation documents, the man she had begun to trust, was leaking information to the press. History was repeating itself in the cruelest way possible. She pushed open the conference room door, her expression carved from ice. "So this is what it was all about, gaining my trust to get insider information? Was protecting me from those photographers just part of your long game?" Jackson turned, his phone still in his hand, confusion quickly giving way to understanding as he realized what she had heard. "Olivia, this isn't what you think. Mike is an old army buddy who works for the Tribune. He's been investigating Harrington for months." "Save it," Olivia cut him off, years of disappointment hardening her voice. "I brought you into my foundation. I welcomed your daughter into my office. I trusted you." The last words emerged as barely more than a whisper, the depth of her betrayal evident in their quietness. "If you would just let me explain." "Your services are no longer required, Mr. Reed," she interrupted, reverting to formal address like armor. "Security will escort you out. Your final payment will be processed by HR." Neither of them noticed Lily standing in the hallway, her new navy blue scarf clutched tightly in her small hands, tears streaming silently down her face, as she witnessed the collapse of something she had only just begun to hope for. The days following Jackson's dismissal stretched into 2 weeks of silence. He returned to his full-time position at Ironclad Fitness, throwing himself into his work with renewed intensity, as if physical exhaustion might drown out the disappointment. He avoided news coverage of the foundation's scandal, changing the radio station whenever it was mentioned, scrolling past headlines on his phone. Lily had become withdrawn, no longer chattering about her day or asking when they might see Olivia again. The navy blue scarf remained stuffed in her backpack, neither worn nor discarded, existing in the same limbo as their broken connection to Olivia. Chapter 10, The Taper, involves former Air Force members Lily Moy and Thomas Armadale, who are trying to cope when regime. At night, when Lily was asleep, Jackson would sit on their small balcony overlooking the Brooklyn streets, nursing a single beer and replaying the confrontation in his mind. He should have told Olivia about his connection to Mike sooner, should have been transparent about his suspicions regarding Harrington. But after years in special forces, secrecy and compartmentalization had become second nature. Information was shared on a need-to-know basis, and he had convinced himself that protecting Olivia from potentially painful revelations was the right course of action. Now he understood that in trying to shield her, he had inadvertently reinforced her deepest fears about trust and betrayal. In her Manhattan office, Olivia worked 18-hour days to contain the damage from the scandal. The audit had confirmed her worst fears. William Harrington had embezzled nearly $2 million over 3 years, funds that should have supported housing and medical care for wounded veterans. The board had rallied behind her, but donor confidence was shaken, and the press continued to speculate about how such fraud could have continued undetected for so long. Each night, Olivia fell asleep on her office couch, too exhausted to make the journey home, only to wake a few hours later with renewed determination to salvage what remained of her brother's legacy. On the 15th day, while searching for a misplaced grant proposal, Olivia discovered Lily's journal wedged between file folders in her desk drawer. The little girl must have left it behind during their last afternoon together. Olivia hesitated, respecting the child's privacy, but something compelled her to open the leather cover. Inside, in careful second-grade handwriting, Lily had created a book of important things. The first pages contained memories of her mother, the way she sang while cooking, how she could name every constellation, the special cookies she made when Lily was sad. Later entries spoke of Jackson, his bedtime stories, his patient help with homework, the way he still set out 3 plates at dinner sometimes before remembering. The most recent entries, however, were about Olivia. Ms. Olivia taught me division today. She doesn't make me feel dumb when I don't understand right away. Another page read, Dad smiled for real when Ms. Olivia was telling a story about her dog that ate her shoes. He doesn't smile for real very much anymore. The final entry contained a drawing, a little girl holding hands with a tall man and a woman with brown hair like Olivia's. Beneath it, Lily had written, Why do grown-ups always leave? First Mom, and now Ms. Olivia. Tears blurred Olivia's vision as she closed the journal, the weight of a child's innocent hope settling heavily on her shoulders. Had she been too quick to judge Jackson? Had her own past betrayals colored her perception so completely that she couldn't see the possibility of innocence? She reached for her phone, then set it down again. Pride and uncertainty formed a barrier as impenetrable as the one Jackson had erected around himself and Lily. That same evening, Jackson received an unexpected call from Martin Walsh, the Bennett Foundation's legal counsel. Mr. Reed, we need your testimony for the case against William Harrington. The articles your friend published have become central to the prosecution's strategy, and we need to establish the chain of evidence. Jackson agreed to testify, making it clear his cooperation was for the sake of justice, not as a favor to Olivia. The morning of the deposition, he dressed in his only suit, the one he had worn to Sarah's funeral, and asked his neighbor to watch Lily for the day. As he knelt to say goodbye to his daughter, she wrapped her arms around his neck with unusual intensity. Are you going to see Miss Olivia today? She asked, her voice small but hopeful. Jackson smoothed her hair, choosing his words carefully. Yes, but it's for grown-up business. Sometimes people can help each other even when they're still figuring things out between them. In the deposition room, Jackson provided detailed testimony about the documents he had discovered while working security at the foundation. He explained how his military friend Mike had recognized Harrington's name from another financial fraud investigation, which had led to their collaboration. Throughout his testimony, he maintained professional composure, never once looking directly at Olivia, who sat silently at the end of the conference table. When questioned why he hadn't brought his concerns directly to Ms. Bennett, Jackson paused. I had evidence, but not proof, he finally said. Ms. Bennett had already experienced betrayal from someone she trusted. I wanted to be certain before adding to that burden. As the deposition concluded, Olivia approached him in the hallway, her professional mask firmly in place, despite the uncertainty in her eyes. "Thank you for your testimony. It will be invaluable to the case." Jackson nodded, his expression equally guarded. "I didn't do it for thanks. I did it because it was right." He turned to leave, then hesitated. "How are you holding up with everything?" A simple question, evidence that he still cared about her well-being despite everything, nearly cracked Olivia's composure. "I've survived worse," she managed, echoing words he had once used about his own struggles. That evening, Jackson found a paper on his kitchen counter that hadn't been there when he left. Lily's school assignment about heroes. His first thought was that she had written about him, or perhaps her mother. But as he read further, he realized she had written about both himself and Olivia. "My dad is brave because he keeps going even when things are hard," she had written. "This is hard. Mrs. Olivia is brave because she helps people who are hurting, even though her heart got broken too. They both taught me that being strong doesn't mean never crying, it means standing up after you cry." Jackson sat heavily at the kitchen table, his daughter's wisdom washing over him like a wave. When had Lily become so perceptive? And how had he failed to see that in trying to protect her from more loss? He had perhaps denied her the very connections she needed to heal. The following morning, he pulled the scholarship application for Westside Academy from his desk drawer, where it had remained since that first day at the gym. He stared at it for a long moment before beginning to fill it out, his practical nature warring with his pride. Lily deserved every opportunity, and his stubbornness shouldn't stand in the way of her future. As he completed the forms, detailing Lily's academic achievements and personal challenges, Jackson realized he was doing more than applying for a scholarship. He was taking the first step toward rebuilding a bridge. Across town, Olivia was making a similar decision as she read through the latest press coverage of the foundation scandal. Mike Carson's articles in the Tribune had been thorough and fair, highlighting the foundation's swift response to the fraud discovery while focusing blame squarely on Harrington. One paragraph caught her attention. Sources close to the investigation credit an unnamed former military consultant with first identifying the suspicious transactions and bringing them to light. She knew immediately this referred to Jackson, and that Mike had deliberately kept his name out of the press, not the actions of someone exploiting a source for a sensational story. The Bennett Foundation's annual fundraising gala arrived on a crisp autumn evening, the elite of New York gathering to support veteran causes while subtly assessing whether the organization had weathered its recent scandal. Olivia stood at the entrance of the ballroom, greeting donors with practiced charm while mentally calculating how each conversation might translate to continued support. She was midway through describing a new rehabilitation program when she glimpsed a familiar figure across the room. Jackson Reed, in a charcoal gray suit, his hand gently guiding Lily, who wore a navy blue dress with her scarf proudly displayed around her shoulders. They hadn't been invited. Jackson had purchased tickets using money he had been saving for Lily's college fund, a decision he hadn't fully rationalized even to himself. They made their way through the crowd until they stood before Olivia, whose professional smile had frozen in place. "Ms. Bennett," Jackson began formally, but Lily stepped forward before he could continue, holding out a small gift box wrapped in silver paper. "We made you something," she said simply, the directness of children cutting through adult complications. With slightly trembling hands, Olivia opened the box to find Lily's navy blue scarf, now adorned with tiny embroidered stars along the edges. "They're like the stars that guide soldiers home," Lily explained, her eyes bright with significance. "Dad taught me how to sew them." Jackson stood a respectful distance away, watching the exchange with quiet intensity. When Olivia looked up at him, questions in her eyes, he stepped forward and handed her an envelope. "Lily's scholarship application for Westside Academy," he said quietly. "Not because we need help, but because she deserves every opportunity." Olivia accepted the envelope, a lump forming in her throat. "I believe I owe you an apology," she said softly. Jackson shook his head. "No, what we owe each other is a fresh start." He extended his hand, not as a formal gesture but as an offering. "Hi, I'm Jackson Reed, former soldier, full-time dad, and occasional hero when the situation requires it." A genuine smile broke through Olivia's composure as she took his hand. "Olivia Bennett. I run a foundation, work too much, and sometimes judge too quickly." Lily looked between them, satisfaction written across her small features. "Does this mean we can be friends again?" "I think," Olivia said, kneeling to meet Lily at eye level, "it means we never really stop." As winter gave way to spring, a new rhythm established itself in their lives. Lily began attending Westside Academy, thriving under the school's advanced curriculum. Jackson accepted Olivia's offer to join the foundation staff, developing a new program specifically for military families. The gap they had identified months earlier during a training session, and Olivia found herself spending more weekends in Brooklyn, joining the Reeds for movie nights and Sunday brunches, her penthouse feeling increasingly empty by comparison. 6 months later, Jackson and Olivia sat side by side in the auditorium of Westside Academy, watching as Lily's class presented their community service projects. The Bennett Foundation had not only recovered from the scandal, but had emerged stronger, with a new program specifically designed to support military families, not just veterans themselves. Jackson now worked full-time for the foundation, developing fitness and reintegration programs for returning service members, while also co-leading support groups for single parents. They had created something neither had anticipated, a partnership built on mutual respect and shared purpose. As Lily took the stage, her navy blue scarf, now a personal trademark, draped confidently around her shoulders, she began presenting her project on building new families. In the audience, Jackson reached for Olivia's hand, their fingers intertwining naturally, comfortably. In his jacket pocket was the old note he had carried for years: "Protect what matters most." Recently, Olivia had added her own words beneath his, "And let others protect you." When Lily concluded her presentation with a quote about how families are built through love, not just blood, she looked directly at Jackson and Olivia, her smile containing all the wisdom of a child who understood that sometimes the deepest wounds create space for the greatest healing. The navy blue scarf around her shoulders caught the stage lights as she bowed, transforming the simple fabric into something luminous, a symbol of loss transformed into connection, of broken paths leading to unexpected destinations, of the quiet courage it takes to begin again.